He's probably the only guy in Durban that can spell half of those flipping names that you gave us, like bread and mice little toilets. So I'm going to hand him over to you guys. He's probably got a couple of those birds for us to see today. So I'm going to let the Natal boys down the second.
Okay.
Right, Seth.
Take that away.
I think after those last couple of presentations, I don't have prizes to give away, but I needed to do something to make it interesting, knowing that I've got the last slot. So I bought 200 grams or 2 liters of the latest beer that I brewed. It's about 10 days old, so it's nice and fresh. And it's the demo beer for what I'm talking about today. It's Maximising hop aroma. I think as brewers, though, so there's a mixture of people here, and I realise we've got professional brewers who want to get the best bang for their buck when it comes to hops. Hops it's nice to throw in as much as you can, but it costs you money. It's the most expensive ingredient when it comes to nice big IPAs, etc. And as home brewers, happy to throw in an extra pack or two just to get that extra beer. But how do we get, as brewers, as home brewers, professional brewers, the best bang for our buck when it comes to hops? And how do we make better hoppy beers as we move along? I know this isn't with the theme. This 2 liters of beer I can pass around as samples. I know we don't have many empty glasses. So we can get some samples, or we can pass it around maybe afterwards.
They're testing glasses. They don't want to cover.
The other option is the person, we do a bit of a raffle, the person who guesses the amount of hops I put into this beer gets the whole 2 liters.
Just give it to Bruce. Bruce has got it.
Share it.
Bruce is 2 middle names. Bruce, there's never enough hops. Williamson.
Maybe just a quick introduction about who I am. So I've been part of Durban Home Brewers for, I wasn't one of the founding members, but I think I joined about a year into the club's formation. You'll see at the bottom right of the screen, geologist. I think Adrian might have, one of our club meetings, given me that name because I used to run the club challenge. We used to challenge series, educational series, and so I'm the guy at the club who used to try and experiment, try and learn, try new things. I've done the sours, I've brewed lambic style beers at home. I think I've still got about 6 bottles left of a beer I made 4 years ago, so it's still sitting there aging and maturing, and I like to experiment with stuff like that. So I'm also a chemical engineer. I've got the science background, the engineering background, and so I like to learn and study and try new things and perfect things along the way. So if I can add to the industry, add to the homebrewers forum, that's what I really enjoy doing. And in some of our meetings, I like to do some educational talks, a bit like this, just to make the homebrewers better at what they're trying to do and teach them along the way. So running homebrew days and stuff like that is what I really enjoy doing. So I think Megan initially put me down. I think in the initial program it was wild yeast, and yeast wrangling was the topic she initially put me down for, because that's also something I've dabbled in. I like to experiment. I managed to harvest. I wrangled a yeast from our back garden that actually produced a decent beer, and I've produced 2 batches of beer out of them. I managed to isolate it and keep it going, and I've got some beers busy brewing from that. Today, though, I want to focus on hops, and I think a lot of us, unless you're a really new brewer and you don't know much about it. Hop aroma comes from the honey, the volatile oils that you have in your hops that you want to get into the beer. And typically, the way we tackle that is to either the whirlpool or in dry hopping, we throw our hops into those stages, because the volatile oils that are in the beer, they normally get driven off by heat. So when you're doing your boil, they come off early in the process. So we tend to focus on whirlpool and dry hopping. So those are the 2 things I'm going to talk about today. So So probably the beginner brewer who wants to get some hop aroma in there, chooses 2 nice hops, maybe Mosaic and Amarillo. There's 100 grams there, throws it into the fermenter. After fermentation's finished, that should give you a nice amount of hop aroma. But really, how do we get more hops, more hop aroma? So one option I think most of us will do. We can try. I think my time.
Well done, good job.
Okay, so let's talk about whirl cooling first. What I've tried to do is, I've done some research, I've learned a few things, and I'm just going to share a few gems with you. Maybe there might be stuff that I've picked up that you haven't encountered, that there might be 1 or 2 things that you could take from this talk that could actually help you in your brewery. If you're a professional brewer, you can take a little bit of that and adapt it to what you've done. But there's a few things you need to consider when whirl cooling. First of all, temperature, then there's time, and those 2 things are quite critical in combination. So if you're whirl cooling at a high temperature, the higher temperatures cause faster extraction of the oils from the hops. The problem is the higher temperatures are also going to drive those aromatics out of the beer. So if you've got a very hot whirlpool, 90 degrees plus, you're going to get those oils into your beer quickly, but they're going to shoot up quite fast too. Okay.
So then you get isomerization and...
Exactly, so you start also producing, so that isomerization I think happens at about 77 degrees, somewhere around there. So you're actually producing some of the bitter compounds that isomerize alpha acids, which you don't necessarily want. So some people go as low as 70. I think the Africa Brew beer was done at about 70 degrees. I think the recipe said 70 for a hop stand. And that's, you want to get it down to that range to be able to get...
That's still sterile.
It's still sterile enough. You're going to kill off most of the bugs. Maybe some thermotolerant organisms are going to survive.
Hops kills everything.
Are going to survive, but it's a pretty good range to go for, is like mid-70s or so. So this particular beer that I made, I was between 75 and 80. So I started at about 80 and it went down to about 75 during the hop stand. Time is also quite critical with this thing. So you don't want to go, if you're too short, you're not going to extract enough oils. Too long, you're actually going to volatilize those oils and they're going to escape from the beer. So it's really a balancing act between temperature and time to get that right. And I don't think there's a magical formula for that, because it depends on your equipment. And that's the next thing there. Your equipment is actually it has a significant influence on how much hop aroma oils you're going to end up with in your beer. If you're doing things like agitation during your hop stand, it actually has a significant impact on that. And I'll show you a graph later that shows how quickly that can change things. So if you're doing whirlpool and you're pumping and getting a bit of circulation going while you're doing that, you're actually stirring up those hops.
Yeah.
And by stirring it up, you're actually extracting faster. So you can actually shorten your time by doing it. If you're just going to throw your hops and then leave it to stand, you give yourself an hour or so. Half an hour, an hour. Some people even go up to 2 hours. So if you've got a big brewery, big commercial brewers, they've got massive vessels and they can't pump it out fast enough, so they tend to have longer hop stands.
Can I ask a quick question? So, sorry, just talking about, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but the type of chiller you use makes a big difference in this as well. So counterflow versus immersion with hop stands. If you're doing a counterflow chiller, a lot of the work's going to stay hot for longer.
Correct.
And you've got variation in that anyway, because some of it's staying hot for longer and some of it's cooling faster. So there's a huge variation in time.
So you might wait for it to cool down to say 90 degrees and you throw your hops in, but then how do you cool it?
You're cooling at variable rates the whole way through a counter.
So your main vessel stays hot while you're counterflowing, so that
some of the work
exposed longer.
Yeah. So the wort has a variable cycle through the whole.
So you're going to get...
You do immersion chilling.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
So equipment can have a big influence on that. Things like the surface area.
A big motherfucker.
So there's like the things that can influence it is like your surface area. So if you've got a wide, narrow, or wide, short vessel, you've got a lot of surface area. So when you've got that happening, a lot of your aromatics are going to come out of the beer. So if you've got a nice, narrow, tall vessel, there's less surface area for those volatiles to come out of the beer. So that's why you've got to factor in some of these things when you decide what sort of time-temperature relationship you're going with. And things like even kettle extraction. So if you've got, especially a commercial brewery, sometimes you would have steam extraction. You don't want your boiler, your brewery to steam up, so often you have a little extractor attached to your kettle.
Your surface is going to be colder.
Yeah, so you're constantly pulling the air out of your vessel, and you're actually going to pull a lot more aromatics out.
Because it's a vacuum.
Yep. So as a home brewer, what I would do with this is also, if you've got a lid for your vessel, put the lid on, seal it up while you're doing that. It keeps, even if the aromatics start accumulating in the head space above the liquid, it will slow down the extraction or the volatilization of your aromatics and keep it in the beer a bit better. So there's so many things, and this is just a short list, there's lots of things that can influence it. One of the things that I actually picked up, which I didn't know about before I started researching this, is pH of your beer can influence the perceived bitterness and how much hop aroma you get out of the beer. Isomerization of alpha acids is actually inhibited by the lower pH. So the lower you go in your pH with the beer, the less alpha isomerization you have, so the less bitterness you're going to have. So if you can throw in
I don't have that problem.
So you're saying, so if you're doing a sour beer,
You fuck.
and you've done the kettle, and you're throwing in hops. If you've done a kettle sour and you're throwing in hops, you're saying you actually are going to get less isomerization, less bitterness, which is a good thing with a sour beer. That's awesome.
But so some people target pH, try and control their mash pH. So if you can't control your mash pH, you've got a range of, say, you want to be in the 5.2 to 5.6 range. Go down as low as you can, while still getting your conversion will actually improve, it will reduce the isomerization, which means you can throw a little bit more hops in there and get more aroma with less bitterness. There was a little...
Oh, right.
I'm wondering if you could throw in lactic acid, do the whirlpool, and then throw in a bit of bicarb at the end to bring yourself back up to the 5.2.
Also during the boil, your pH of your...
tedious.
Now you're fucking with alkalinity. Oh, no.
No, that's a whole different.
It's something you probably can play with, but yeah, if you get sour beers, it is going to have an effect. But for me, it's when I brewed this beer, I brought it down to the sort of 5.1, 5.2 range, just to try just that little bit, reduce the amount of bitterness, so I can get a little bit more hop into the beer and get maybe a bit more hop aroma out of it.
When you reduced that pH, did you do that for your mashed water?
Yeah. Yeah. So for mash,
So what pH was your mashed water?
5.2.
5.2.
Yeah.
So
Sorry,
that's
5.2
what your
before
mash-
adding the mash.
No, that
Before
was,
adding-
so I controlled my mash pH to 5.2.
So
What was
fi-
the water
uh,
just before adding the mash?
Water pH is 7.9.
Okay, that's-
Okay, no. Our water pH is whatever the pH of the glass was before you put it in.
Yeah,
It just changes. And there's no nothing power.
German water is quite soft, the pH is fairly consistent.
Lovely.
So
I
I
struggled to get under 8.
put acid into the water in before I start the mash. So keep my water up, put a little acid in there just so that when I then mash.
What acid do you add?
Sorry?
What acid do you add?
Phosphoric.
No.
So, yeah, get the pH as low as possible. It's actually going to help you a little bit there. Let's talk a little bit about dry hopping. So, I think we've all dabbled in dry hopping. If you haven't, it's probably not getting the hop aroma that you would like if you like big hoppy beers. Similar to whirlpool hopping, the two things that are going to influence the final result are pretty similar: temperature and time. Temperature again, because it influences the extraction of oils. Warmer temperatures are going to speed it up. Lower temperatures are going to slow that down.
Hey!
Hey,
Oh, chill out.
Onbestuurbaar.
So lower temperatures slow things down, but actually some oils actually do better at lower temperatures than they do at warmer temperatures. So like 4 or 5 degrees is actually an optimal temperature for certain oils, certain thiols, etc. are actually extracted better at lower temperatures. So if you know the hop that you're using, and you know what it's high in, you should actually, if you really want to maximize the amount of aroma you're getting out of that, is find out what's the best temperature for that to be dry hopped at, to get the best extraction out of that. One of the benefits of actually dry hopping at lower temperatures, the sort of 4 or 5 degree range, is that you get significantly reduced hop creep. If you're a commercial brewer, the diastase extraction at that temperature is a lot significantly lower. So it's not something as home brewers we really worry about. We drink our beers too fast. They're not going to last that long. But that is just one little benefit that you get. When it comes to time, I think some of us have dabbled in maybe 1 day to up to a week. But one thing I did learn through this process, that the shorter the time is, the more fruity aromatics you get. So initially it's the more fruity type aromatics that come out of the hop. But the longer you dry hop for, the more polyphenols start coming out of those hops. And that's typically what gives you that kind of hop burn, the more harsh bitterness out of the hop. So you actually want to target shorter dry hops, dry hopping periods, to actually get more of that fruity, citrusy kind of notes out of your hops. So even if you
I agree with you, but it depends on what you want out of your dry hopping.
Exactly.
So
That's why I said if you want more fruity, tropical fruit type
if you want the more dank stuff, you've got to go a little bit longer or do a double hop.
From a commercial side, okay? So I've got a recipe that says dry hop after 3 days and dry hop again after so and you don't know how your beer is going to sell. How do you control that? So like, I know you're a home brewer, but like for us, we like stepping into that side.
So the modern trend is shorter, cooler dry hopping. So 3 days at lower temps is generally a rule of thumb now. As opposed to it used to be a week of dry hopping at room temp.
Okay.
No, so shorter, cooler, you're getting maximum extraction is the one thing.
So 24 to 48 hours if you want a New England
And it's
IPA.
okay, even if your beer doesn't sell too much.
It doesn't matter because you've taken it.
It's about how long it takes to
Yeah. Like in the fish and the
Just from a practical standpoint, when you dry up, so okay, now you're cold crashing your beer, it's gone to 4 degrees Celsius. Do you make like a little whirlpool and then just pour in pellets?
I'll do some agitation when I'll kind of shake up.
Yeah, so just a little bit of movement.
A little bit just to kind of break them up.
And then just normal dry pellets? Do you first
So I use dry pellets.
Okay.
That's what I've used. So.
And then you wait 24 hours basically for more fruity.
Yep.
Okay, just from a practical. Thank you.
Yeah.
So at what day after adding, or starting the fermentation, does that 1 day or day one start?
We'll get to that. Different options.
Sorry.
I think I spoke about shorter and longer times. One of the other things I also learned, some oils are actually reabsorbed into the hop material. So the act is, you know, when you throw your dry hops in, they're almost like sponges. They swell up and they actually start absorbing things. So and some of the things that reabsorb are the oils. One of the materials, one of the oils, 4-MMP. I can't say the full name. Sorry.
You don't have to.
You may have heard of 4-MMP. It gives you a lot of tropical fruit type flavors. Those actually they've done tests and they show significant reabsorption of those oils back into the house. So it goes up and it comes back down again. So, and they found a maximum of about 48 hours. Obviously depends on temperature and agitation, various things, but approximately 48 hours if you want to maximize 4-MMP extraction. That's how long you want to be. Okay. So, and then some of them are actually 24 hours. So some monoterpenes, hydrocarbon type oils, 24 hours is your peak. And then it starts dropping off again after that. Pulling it back. Yeah. So if you can actually play with, like if you're going to do multi-stage hopping, you can say, okay, this particular hop is best over 48 hours. I'm going to maximize that extraction. This one is 24 hours. So you add this one in today, that one tomorrow.
No, it's the oil content.
So you're not taking all the essence out.
Total oil.
Nothing.
It's your beta oils. And
The beta oils, that's what I'm asking. So I opt for beta oil, so
You have to know what kind of oil you're dealing with as well.
Yes, that's what I'm
So it's not about total oil, and I'll touch on that just now. It's more about the type of oils that you have in your house. And if you know your variant, you will know, you can find out what type of oil there is in there. And
So you could effectively, if you're going to be doing dry hopping over 4 or 5 days, you could overlap.
Exactly.
You could overlap to get multiple efficiency out of the
So
system.
pick your hop that, if you want to start
And then you
with
could
the
have
5
hop
day,
A, hop B, hop C, and hop D. And at the end of the day, you keg and you've got all that complexity.
Exactly. So you can stage it like that. So
Yes.
the 5 day one goes to now, 3 day one goes to 2 days later, 1 day goes to another 2 days later.
Yeah, so you just got to be careful about oxygen ingredients.
However, you can just go buy the hop oils from Brewcraft.
Is that like the Woolies version of
It's a Woolies version of what you
We're
do.
doing craft brew. Okay, so I think that for me was typically the way I've done things, I just through 5 different hops, go into dry hopping, whatever, and see what comes out. But you can actually get quite careful about it and optimize things. I think I spoke on equipment when it came to Whirlpool, also affects dry hopping. If you think about those that have some sort of science background, you'll know rates of extraction or diffusion. So oils moving through is going to be moving through liquid is going to be influenced by the concentration gradient. So, and if you what this means is if you do some form of agitation or stirring, you put it so the oils that are close to the hop particles are getting pulled away, which then speeds up more hop oils coming out of those hop particles.
But then you're also talking about cylindrical density. The pressure, the shape of the vessel influences the pressure at the bottom.
But so a tall, narrow versus a wide, short fermenter can influence the dynamics of the extraction.
And whether there's still a yeast cake on the bottom. At a homebrew level, a yeast cake on the bottom or going to a secondary also makes a huge difference.
Yes. Because if your hops settle down and get kind of partially buried in your yeast as well, you're not going to get the extraction that you want there either. So there's a lot of things.
No, I mean we're deep in debate about
Yeah.
various aspects.
So there's other things like agitation. At different temperatures, the hops might float or sink, and that could also influence things. So what I've found, what my experience is that when you do dry hopping cold, the hops do tend to sink. And they actually then pull down a lot of yeast with them. So they just get covered in yeast, and then you don't get that extraction that you want. So it probably then makes sense to do is to transfer to a secondary, or if you've got a conical fermenter, you can pull that yeast cake out potentially and then do your dry hopping. But these are some things you need to consider when trying to optimize them.
So that's dangerous. In the case of that, you pull your yeast cake out. Would you agitate or non-agitate?
What are you saying? Should you then agitate?
Yes, or should you not? Considering that the fermenter should have a CO2 layer on top of it.
Should do, and if you can keep a CO2 layer and not get oxygen, then agitation is not a problem. So, but normally, if you can make sure that no oxygen gets in, then you're fine.
Just a light swirl, maybe.
Yeah.
So I mean,
agitation doesn't need to be.
the CO2 will get released from, and then
Yes. Yeah.
And that agitation can be a once a day
irritation.
Natural is just
Slow stir.
If you have some way of
Just keep the bucket.
Why don't you just pump CO2 and low volume from the bottom of the fermenter?
especially if you've got a conical fermenter that's best for getting some form of agitation, you don't get oxygen.
Just be careful of that because you go off all the time.
That's why you only do it like say once a day for 30 seconds. Just stir things up and those things.
You always find
I spoke, we touched on multi-stage hopping.
Sorry, one more question. What is temperature in terms of what's cold in terms of the last probably?
We'll touch on the temperature just now. So we spoke about multi-stage and doing multi-steps, dry hopping. One thing that I found quite interesting in my research is that it's only really been found to be beneficial in small-scale fermenters. So large-scale commercial fermenters haven't seen a significant benefit in, say, doing two dry hops, double dry hopping at a single temperature, for example. So if you don't put two, load now, 5 days later do another load, throw them all in now, you'll get the same benefits out of them. But on a homebrew scale, for some reason, I think with the smaller vessels, it actually gives you a bit of a benefit.
It'll be interesting where at what point how that changes on the literage. Because you say small scale, but like, you know, a lot of us craft breweries in South Africa are small scale.
Yeah.
Could be nano breweries in America or something like that where the studies are done. So
Yeah, you basically glorify numbers.
we glorify numbers, yeah, we do.
We all glorify homebrewers.
This is a graph I pulled out of somebody's. There was a paper that I was looking at that where they've done a study looking at concentration of different oils. And this, for example, is linalool. Looking at the scale is parts per billion, so the higher the better. And the kind of timeline, if you can't see, that's a 24-hour sort of timeline. Different colors or different temperatures. So 0 is the green line, 0 degrees. 13 degrees is that one, and 20 degrees. So 20 degrees for an ale is your typical fermentation temperature. If you're going to be dry hopping at that sort of temperature, slightly chilled is down there. Obviously, cold crash, we normally go down to 0, close to 0 if you're doing a cold crash. And what's quite surprising is
That converge after 3 hours.
Yeah, but it's nice and high after like 3 hours. You're at 13 degrees. This actually gets you your peak extraction, but it starts to drop off again after that.
Yeah.
And this one, what I wanted to show you also between these two graphs is that one is dy is dynamic, so there's some form of agitation. This one's static, so it was just left there with no mixing. There they achieved 1,200 parts per billion. Yeah, they only achieved 400 parts per billion.
Wow.
So with a little bit of agitation, you actually get a lot more extraction.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so these are some of the things you can actually start playing with when you're looking at some of your oils. I want to touch on hop. No, I'm running out of time, 2 minutes. I want to talk a little bit about hop variants. Total oils are not always the most important. Rather look at the type of oils that there are in the hops. That should be your focus when you start looking at what type of flavors you want. Look at the volatiles that are in there, but there's also things called precursors. So your precursors, it's not something that's going to give you that aromatic, that aroma, but when the yeast processes it, it converts it into quite an aromatic compound, into that particular volatile. For example, a lot of yeast, a lot of hops have thiol and geraniol precursors, and the yeast likes to convert those into those thiols and those geraniol oils, which give you a lot more aroma. How would you use that though? So those are if you know you've got a hop that's got a lot of precursor in it, throw that in during fermentation while your yeast is still active, and your yeast will then convert that into some more aromatics. Biotransformation, exactly.
Oh,
So
I spoke about that.
Fucking Errol's still awake.
I'm very drunk,
if you use a hop that doesn't have precursors in it, it's not really going to be beneficial for you to throw it in and try to get biotransformation out of it. Some hops will be higher in the actual thiols and geranials. Those are better suited for adding in post-fermentation. So you can actually then...
Cold crash.
Yeah, so during a cold crash or even just dry hop at fermentation temperatures, but cooler is often better depending on what you're putting in it. So like I said, high precursor hops, if you know you've got a high precursor hop, throw that in during fermentation, or even during a hop stand. But it's quite difficult to know what these are. It can even vary, within a variant, it can vary from hop to lot.
Hop freshness is a big problem,
And your age of your hop can influence it, but there are some typical trends based on the variants of hop that you have. So that you can use, especially as a home brewer. If you're bigger scale commercial brewer, you can actually get some of that data from the suppliers. If you and you can start getting some of that useful information. Okay, so for this particular beer, when it comes to sampling it later,
Now.
Organize the glasses.
okay, so
Don't worry,
quickly talk to you about what I did. I did a hop stand. I cooled my beer to 80 degrees, and then I pitched my first couple packets of hops. In this particular case, it was 1 hour. I had a problem with my pump, so I didn't do recirculation for this particular one, so I chose to go with the 1 hour stand. My first dry hop was 48 hours after pitching yeast. The reason I did this is that I wanted to use, so I didn't want to throw it in right at the beginning of fermentation. It was a very active fermentation. I was using the verdant yeast, which can be quite aggressive. And I think I lost about half a litre of beer in this particular batch. Anyway,
How do you lose all that? Low
especially once I threw the hops into the fermentation, it just kind of kicked off more.
And it pumped out.
And it just calmed down in the fermentation. So I did lose a little bit of hops because it was quite a full fermenter. And so, just in terms of quantities of hops, it was about 75, 80 grams at Whirlpool. There was nothing else on the oil, so I only did the Whirlpool. I did 100 grams as the first edition, and 25 grams at 5 degrees.
We total already when we did the first edition. No.
So that's the invitation.
That's we lose so much.
So that's why I did two.
So you were still
I was trying to use some of the get some yeast bioconservation to get some of the.
Not a good weight there.
So it was towards the end of the fermentation and it just started to take off. So it passed to 2 degrees.
But don't you think you get that anyway? Because enough yeast still alive after primary
Probably would.
So I mean, that's why we had.
But if there's no sugars in it, they go dormant, so they go to sleep.
The sugar's in the hops.
Not very much. A little bit.
Enough to cause biogas. Enough to cause hop fuel.
That's the enzyme for it. So yeah, so a total of about 300 grams of hops in a 23 litre batch of beer. 3 steps of addition. I've tried to range of there was some Citra, Bizarca, a little bit of Amarillo. But equal splits of 4 different yeast, 4 different hops that we chose for this particular day. It was my learning experience that I just wanted to share with you guys. Maybe there's hopefully 1 or 2 gems that you can take away from it. Any questions?
Well done.
No, you didn't, did you?
What was the question?
Thanks, Ed.
So the
I've got a general comment. Sorry, I'm also a hophead and spent 10 years researching this shit. For me, my biggest mission, any homebrew suppliers or general brew suppliers, is to get people to put dates or hop crop dates on their batch dates and packaging information on their hop packets and expiry dates. Because I feel like homebrewers are getting the shit that gets returned into the system that's 3-4 years old, and then all this is irrelevant anyway because it's shit by then. It's lost all its volatility. It's lost all its good oils.
It's pig food.
And I think we are being sold pig food by a lot of suppliers. I hope no suppliers present are in that. I know.